Sarah here. Welcome back. So today's video is a fun one. I'm doing a VR to the tag Inside Out Tarot Challenge. This tag was created by Samantha Menzo, like last year, January 2022. I remember watching Katie Flowers' video response last year when Katie was still posting videos, and I've just had this in the drafts for a long time, and I finally got around to doing it. So this challenge came from TikTok. If you know the Pixar movie Inside Out, the movie features a protagonist who has 5 different emotions personified as little like creatures or beings inside their head. And in this movie, everyone has different emotions that are like little personifications of those emotions inside their head. And Samantha adapted this challenge from TikTok. So apparently there was a video trend going around at the time where people were casting different actors as the different emotions inside their heads. And so Sam decided to change it up by casting different tarot cards as little emotions inside her head. I really love the Pixar movies. I have such a soft spot for some of them, especially this one, Inside Out. I thought the idea to personify emotions as characters was just really cool. It was visually very interesting to look at and thematically just really cool. And it is a good reminder of how emotions in our head, they don't have to take over our entire brain. They're just one aspect of who we are. And sometimes when we're in the depths of our emotions, it can be so easy for us, I mean, for me at least, to remember that, like, emotions are fleeting. Joy is fleeting, sadness is fleeting, anger and fear is fleeting. They will come up over and over again, but they are also fleeting. And I don't have to feel so sad or worried that this one emotion is going to take over my entire life. So, I don't know. I just thought that thematically the movie was really cool. I thought this was an interesting set of prompts to do because I am on a search for just other tags and other prompts and other ways to make videos and talk about things that aren't just categorizing decks in different ways. Because as much as I like my decks, I'm also at a loss for words sometimes. I feel like there's only a certain number of things I can say about a specific deck. So when I'm categorizing the decks in the same ways or different ways over and over, I just don't feel like I have too much different things to say about specific decks. So for this tag, to be using different cards instead of specific decks for each emotion, I thought that was really interesting, and it definitely gave me a lot to think about. And it was just a different type of challenge. I definitely misunderstood the challenge at first because I was initially trying to just pick different decks for each emotion, and I was like, oh, this is so easy, like this deck for joy and this deck for disgust. But then when I rewatched the original video, it is casting specific tarot cards for each emotion. And Samantha did explain that the point of the challenge is not to use the cards based off of their specific meaning, but more just on the art of the card. So I felt like in that way, it was a really cool exercise to just appreciate the different art, the different depictions, the different variety in body language and facial expressions and colors and moods inside the card. So this was a really cool challenge. And when it came to selecting decks that I wanted to look through to pick out cards for my emotions, it was cool to think about which decks were the most emotive, because I realized that there are some decks that I have where even though I like them, I feel like the facial expressions and the body language just wasn't emotional or emotive enough. So it was really cool and interesting to think about the different decks that are more emotive and that I could use to personify the emotions and cast as emotions in my head. So coming up with the answers for these emotions did take me a little bit more time, but it was really enjoyable, mindful time. I just put on a good playlist and I was just searching through decks and looking at each image, and it was just a really cool time spent looking at all of these different cards. And I will say, this tag does not require you to have multiple decks. Like, I think there is kind of a trend going around, or there's some commentary on how some tags or some videos or some trends do rely on people having a lot of different decks. So this tag, definitely, you don't need to have a lot of different decks. So if you only have one deck to choose from, like, that's fine. That's all you really need. All you need is one tarot deck. Just because I was extra and I pulled multiple cards for each emotion doesn't mean you have to be, If you're looking for a tag to join in on and you don't have like a bunch of decks to choose from, this tag is still a good one. So that's all for the intro. Let's take a look at what cards I would cast as the emotions inside my head. Okay, so the order of the emotions I'm going through is really just based off of a certain picture that I was looking at while I was looking at the cards, so I'm just going to go with this order. So the first emotion I wanted to talk about is disgust. So the 3 cards I pulled were 5 of Swords from the Mystical Cats Tarot, 6 of Wands from the Fountain Tarot, and the 7 of Wands from the Insomnia Tarot. But again, the specific card names don't really matter. I'm just looking at these from the images. I believe it was Sam or Katie who mentioned that Disgust was a little bit hard for them to find cards for, but for me, I found this kind of easy because I kind of know what Disgust feels like and manifests like for me. So, for example, in the 5 of Swords here for the Mystical Cats Tarot, we have these 4 cats that are like hissing at this 5th cat. And this 5th cat looks like a Sphinx cat. It's like a hairless cat. it visually looks very different from these other 4 cats. This idea of disgust, for me, it feels like derision. It feels like wanting to hiss at something. It feels like responding to something or reacting in a way that's not really wise or rational or patient. And I'm not saying that I never need to have disgust ever. I think that just, disgust as an emotion neutrally shows up in this kind of energy for me, where I'm like, okay, I don't want you in my space. You're gross. Get out. I don't want to look at you. I don't want to think about why you're here. I don't want to put much thought into this. It's gross. You're weird. You're nasty. I know that the emotion of disgust can get kind of loaded, but a recent incident I can think of is we have found fleas on our cat last week. So trying to comb that out and trying to clean up our entire house and finding, just little flea thingies everywhere. Ugh, it was so gross. It was so disgusting. So this is definitely a feeling of what disgust kind of feels like for me. So another way that disgust kind of manifests for me or shows up for me is the 6 of Wands image. And I know this is funny because the 6 of Wands can be a card about victory and about winning and about feeling good. But I know that for me, sometimes disgust can show up looking like this, where I feel like I could be either end of the spectrum or either like figure or energy here. So to describe this card visually, we have someone who seems to be crowd surfing in a way, and they seem like they're having a great time with their wand. But when I look at this card, especially in the context of like the disgust emotion, I see someone who is having a grand time, perhaps at the expense of other people. So I feel like sometimes I'm on this person's side where I am having fun and I almost take a little bit of pride or joy in I'm better than other people, to put it very bluntly. But I've also been on the other side where I'm like, not having a great time. I'm not having like this super wow, incredible, victorious moment. And I'm like, how dare you have a great time when some of us are out here suffering? I have had feelings on, both sides of those where I'm the one enjoying a great time, even at the expense of others, or even like trying to ignore other people. I've also been on the other side where I've been like, how dare you have a good time? So that is another way that disgust shows up for me. And a third way that disgust shows up for me, or, feels like for me, is like the 7 of Wands from the Somnia Tarot. So I find this energy kind of similar to the first energy in that there is someone kind of being battled against, being pit against the whole crowd of people. And there's that energy of just finding fault with someone or something for being different, And again, I cast no judgment on my emotions of disgust. I feel like it is just a neutral emotion, just like any other. Again, with the example of the fleas, like that's a very disgusting feeling I had. But yeah, when I'm disgusted with someone or something, it makes me want to seek out other people who also feel disgusted with that thing so I can feel validated in my fear as well. And again, like I've also been on the other side where I have felt like I wanted to be a little bit different. And in that path of wanting to be different, I end up almost feeling a little bit disgusted or a little bit like turning up my nose at people who are sticking with the crowd. So I've definitely been on like either side of, this like invisible line here. So those are a few examples of what disgust looks like and feels like for me. So the next emotion I want to talk about is fear. These are the cards that I chose for my emotion of fear. We have the Tarot of Curious Creatures, 7 of Swords. We have the 9 of Swords from the Tarot of Renal, and the Tower card from the Somnia Tarot. And again, the names of the cards don't particularly matter. I just chose based off of the images on what fear feels like or looks like to me. So the first card that I chose was this particular 7 of Swords because one of my recurring fears, consistent fears, is that other people are suspicious of me. Other people think I don't really belong, that other people just, are suspicious, and that I'm acting suspicious in a way to make other people suspicious of me. This has manifested in, for example, me wanting to over-explain myself a little bit, and or sometimes I try to flip to the opposite end, and then I don't explain myself enough because I'm like, well, I feel like if I over-explain, then I seem even more suspicious, so I shouldn't explain where I'm coming from at all. And I've struggled with this with making YouTube videos because a part of me is like, I'm afraid to reveal too much of myself that's like personal or authentic. But at the same time, sometimes when I watch back my footage, I'm like, oh my gosh, you did not say much that was substantiated. You just kind of talked about things on a surface level. You didn't really go deep or go personal with what things really mean to you. So with the 7 of Swords, this definitely is a manifestation of a lot of my different fears. Just a fear that I may be seen as suspicious, and then I try to compensate by either over-explaining or by like not explaining myself at all. Like it's just weird. And another aspect of this card as fear for me is also sometimes I can feel suspicious or doubtful of other people as well. Sometimes I am so guarded that I am suspicious of other people and I feel guarded and I feel like, well, what do you want with me? Or if you want to like have conversation with me, does this mean you're going to expect me to be your best friend for like the rest of my life? Like I do struggle with sometimes projecting or fearing that someone expects like a lot of me when maybe they don't expect anything of me. It's me projecting my expectations or my fears of my expectations or their expectations onto them, if that makes any sense. So this card just, it's such a delightful representation of what fear feels like to me. And it was really cool to think about this and visualize this, because I feel like now that I have a better visual on this and can put it to words, I can be more mindful of this kind of fear and try to circumvent that more in the future. So another card that I chose to represent fear was this Nine of Swords from the Tarot of Now. And definitely with the Swords cards, it is a little bit of a toss-up between the 7, 8, and 9 of Swords. I eventually chose this 9 of Swords. Actually, let me see if I can pull out the 8 of Swords to compare. So, comparing these two pictures, with the 8 of Swords and the 9 of Swords, they both do have this element of seeming bound and seeming controlled or constricted and restricted in a way, right? I see this 8 of Swords, they're surrounded by cobwebs. And the implication here is that the cobwebs are not too hard to actually get out of. Whereas the Nine of Swords, I see that this fox is surrounded by thorns. And, these brambles that look like they hurt a lot more than cobwebs actually hurt. And so I chose the Nine of Swords, this art here, because this is what anxiety and sometimes, negative self-talk feels like. It feels like no matter what I do, I'm going to get hurt either way. It feels like even if I feel good for a little bit, I'm still surrounded by bad things. I'm still surrounded by hurtful things. And a lot of this is the negative self-talk. I know that a lot of the pain that I experience comes from me like ruminating on things or telling myself I shouldn't have felt good. Like a lot of it is very mental and very self-directed. Like the source of my pain sometimes comes from myself. But anyway, I eventually chose the Nine of Swords here as opposed to the Eight of Swords because it feels like the pain here or the potential pain is just a lot greater here than here. And this person, this fox being covered by their cape, and even this rabbit here is like looking scared. This just feels like a more powerful show of fear than this one does. So that's why I chose the Nine of Swords here. And I also want to point out that this fox seems like they could really do with a bit of stress management techniques, which is something that I forget about quite regularly. I forget that stress management is a thing. I was just hanging out with one of my good friends the past weekend, and I was telling her about these anxieties that I was having, and I was telling her about how over the past couple months, I've kind of lost confidence in myself in a few ways, and I'm trying to work on regaining that confidence and the self-assurance. And I asked her if she had low self-esteem. I felt like low self-esteem is pretty common. I wondered if it was even universal. And she told me about her own experiences with self-esteem, about how she knows herself very well. She considers herself pretty self-actualized, and she only has low self-esteem in like a couple of like certain areas which make perfect sense for her and her life. And she pointed out to me this really nice nugget of wisdom. She said, you spend so much time and energy worrying about if you can do the thing, and you could spend that time and energy just doing the thing. And, in certain situations, in certain ways, that could be taken as like, oh, wow, thank you, my anxiety is cured. But at the same time, I feel like it is also a very good nugget of wisdom to keep in mind. And I mentioned that because with this fox, if I were in this fox's position, I'd probably also be in the same position of like, oh my God, this thing's so scary. I'm going to get hurt either way. Like, this just sucks. I feel like what this fox could benefit from is some stress management techniques. So possibly some like breathing, take some time and energy to actually focus and regulate your emotions and your stress in the present moment. And then when you feel ready to, like, let's work towards opening that blindfold and taking a look and actually assessing where you are and what you can do about it. In the brambles, there's a little opening right here. So I feel like if I were in this situation, I would want to try to work on managing my stress. And then after I've kind of toned down my internal like fear screamingness, I can then work on assessing my outside world and like figuring out, okay, what can I do next? Or like, what can I do to help myself feel better as the time passes, as the sun rises again? So basically, stress management is what I'm like pointing out. And I'm also want to point out that just low self-esteem is not as universal as I thought it was. And I think that gives me hope in a way. So the next card I want to talk about is the Tower from the Somnia Tarot. This is such a powerful or potent message of fear, a representation of fear. In this card, we see a house that is strapped onto someone, and the house seems to be like literally burning. And this person is like strapped to the house, but what they're doing, first of all, they're like staying strapped, and they're also just laying like face down in the water. It just feels like a very despairing sort of card. And I guess there's a bit of sadness in here too. But I chose this card for fear because it feels like the fear of what this means or what this might mean or what led me to this place or what have you. It would cause me to stay in this stuck place of I'm afraid instead of trying to find the tools to save myself and maybe save what I can from this house, but more importantly, save myself so that I can keep going another day. And like, that's just what fear feels like to me. It's just a sad card and a fearful card. Like, this person could find the ways to try to, cut themselves loose. They could try to get some water and splash it on the fire. There's just a lot of ways that I feel like I could be trying to help myself with my fear. And yet sometimes in the moment, like, I just don't know how to manage my fear or the stress that comes from the fear. And then I just stay stuck. So another really, really cool set of cards for this emotion, fear. Okay, so the third emotion here is joy. For joy, we have the Day Captain of Rockets, or the King of Wands from the Tarot and Space Cosmic Zen. We have Judgment, or in this deck, Good Kitty, from the Mystical Cats Tarot. And we have the Three of Cups from Tarot of Curious Creatures. So, first of all, this King of Wands is definitely one of my favorite King of Wands to date. I chose this card to exemplify joy for me because one situation that I feel joy in is knowing that I am in total control of myself and of my environment. And I feel like this Day Captain of Rockets or the King of Wands is just a perfect example of that. In this deck, the Day Captains are the Kings because there is a Night Captain, which represents the Queens, and then the Day Captain, which represents the Kings. The Night Captain is someone who kind of takes care of all the internal affairs, and the Day Captain, because they work in the day shift where most people are awake and functioning, the Day Captain oversees most of like the external affairs and sometimes can be in charge of like motivating people as well because it's daytime and it's sunlight. So I really like this deck's choice in choosing the Night Captain for Queens and the Day Captain for the King. I really like this depiction of the King of Wands. Like, this person looks so in control of themselves. I know that her name is May, but May looks so in control of herself. She looks so ready to like move on. She looks super peppy with her coffee in hand, and she looks ready to like conquer a new day. Not just go to a new day, but like conquer a new day. She has a new day of running a ship and feeling good about herself and the ship, and that is just what joy feels like to me. I've also been like kind of a leader or an admin of many things in the past. I was a part of a couple of clubs in high school. In college, I was the president of my sorority, and even now I'm still admin of like a local Asian meetup group. So being a leader of sorts is really important to me and really fun for me. And in those days and in those moments, in those moods, when I feel in control of myself and my energy, boy, I feel the most happiest. I feel the most fulfilled when I'm able to manage a team and just exert my energy out there without fearing of, what people think of me. Like, that is just true joy for me. Oh my gosh, I really love this card so much. Another card that I chose to represent joy is the Good Kitty from the Mystical Cats Tarot. And granted, this is the Judgment card in other decks, and Judgment is actually one of my favorite cards. I just love this depiction of Judgment so much. Typically, the Judgment card, to me, represents a form of release or awakening. And I know awakening is how Judgment has been renamed in other decks sometimes. I really love the idea of Judgment and releasing because it feels like a call or a nudge for me to release my past baggage, release my fears, release my anxieties, release my disgusts, release, all of these things that are mentally holding me back, and just allow myself to be present and allow myself to move forward and allow myself to feel the good feelings that are needed for me to move forward and conquer whatever I need to conquer. I love the Judgment card for that reason. I love the idea of releasing all those things so I can move forward and conquer. The Good Kitty specifically, I just really, really love this renaming of Judgment here too, because I feel like what also makes me feel happy is being recognized and acknowledged for the hard work that I put into some things. And I'm not saying I want to be praised for like things that didn't cost me effort. Like, when things don't cost me much effort or time, I don't really need to be praised on those. But when things are important to me, when I put a lot of effort and thought into things, I would like to be acknowledged and validated for those. I mean, who doesn't, right? It just makes me feel even better. Like, yeah, people are noticing the things that I do, and it makes other people feel good, and that makes me feel even better. So it's just a cycle of joy and validation and happiness. And like, I know that I don't do things for the external validation. Like, that's not the main motivation why I do things. I'm just saying it is a nice thing to receive. And when I do receive external praise and acknowledgement, it does make me feel really good. And I also know that when I am in a place where I do feel good and feel happy and I can give myself that acknowledgement and praise, it just makes me feel even happier because learning to give myself acknowledgement and praise is something that I wasn't born with or didn't learn much throughout my life, you know? So, in the moments when I am able to praise myself and feel good about myself, that is me healing from all the past trauma and baggage that I have. And I just love this card. This is what happiness feels like to me. Oh, I am a good kitty. So, the third card that I chose for praise was the Three of Cups. And I believe Sam also mentioned a Three of Cups card in her video. And, you know, for good reason. It is just such a joyous card. And I really love this depiction of this three lizards or reptiles. They're just hanging out, having their nice cup of wine or water or their nice drink, and they're just having a good time. This like silly, joyous face is the face that I absolutely love to make when I'm out with my friends. It's just such a fun face to make and a fun mood to create and to enjoy. Like this feeling of, haha, we're just being silly, we're laughing about dumb things, we're memeing about dumb stuff, and it's just all good fun because life is about dumb stuff sometimes. Like that's just a fun, super joyous feeling. I do have a tendency to want to be super deep and philosophical and therapeutical like all of the time. So in those moments when I can feel joy and just being silly and like laughing about anything with my friends is a super super fun time. I also want to point out that these three girls, well, I don't want to gender them, these three people wearing the same dress, it just brings me back to the days of me being in sorority. And part of the thing that you have to do in sorority occasionally, as with any organization sometimes, is you have to wear a dress code sometimes. So for us, for some events or some meetings, you have to wear your sorority letters, your sorority sweatshirts. And sometimes you have to wear the same outfit because we're going through recruitment or we're going through rush week together and we want to wear a cohesive outfit to pull the whole theme together. Literally, sorority was like the only time that I ever really had to match with other people. So this idea of like being able to match with other people, it just sometimes adds to the fun vibe. And I know that some people are super against wearing matching outfits. Like I totally get where you're coming from. I'm just saying that in the context of sorority, where we wanted to create a cohesive theme, we want to present a united front to other people, like it felt really good. So just seeing these three pals being happy, enjoying their little life and enjoying their little cup is just a really fun time. I really enjoy this card. So those are my cards for the emotion of joy. So the next emotion I want to talk about is sadness. I definitely did not plan on choosing specifically a 4, 5, and 6, but it just kind of worked out that way. So the first card here is the Four of Cups from the Mystical Moments. And we have the Five of Earth or the Five of Pentacles from the Mystical Cat's Tarot. And the Six of Emotions or the Six of Cups from the Muse Tarot. So the first card I chose was this card. This card feels like a lot of wallowing. It feels like everything is really sad and really dreary. And all that I can see in front of me is sadness and dreariness. I am fortunate though that I do have a partner who loves me a lot and who will help me not really solve my feelings when I'm sad, but just help be with me as I'm being sad. And sometimes I do realize that he's there, and sometimes I don't really realize that he's there and he's available to help. And not just my partner too, but literally any of my friends I could reach out to. You know, they're in this position of like, hey, we're here to help you, whether I really realize it or not. So this energy of just wallowing and needing some time to, you know, just be by myself and cry or be sad and sulk a little bit, that definitely feels a lot like sadness energy for me. So I really appreciate this depiction of sadness. It's just very neutral and, I don't know, very calming in a way, I guess, very validating. So another card that I chose is the Five of Earth or the Five of Pentacles from the Mystical Cat's Tarot. And this gives me a similar vibe to this sadness because when I feel sad, sometimes I feel like I'm almost the only person in the world who feels that way. It feels very isolating, I guess, to be sad. And I feel like that is kind of a part of just living in LA or living on your own. A lot of my friends are farther away. They live in like the neighboring county or just a couple cities away, and it's not super easy or fast to drive to them. Plus, because of my irregular work schedule, I can't spontaneously see friends some days that I wish I could. So sometimes the sadness just feels really isolating and it feels really alone. And sometimes it feels like, man, I don't even want to reach out to my friends because they probably have it like so good right now, or they're probably going through their own stuff. They probably don't want to deal with me and my sadness and whatever I'm going through. This feeling of isolation and like giving yourself a barrier, like telling yourself you shouldn't go seek out help or go, find comfort, like that does feel like sadness to me. So I do appreciate this depiction of this card because it's a little reminder that when I'm sad, sometimes I need to remember like what actually helps me. Is there a solid, real reason why like this person, my friend can't really help me when I'm sad? Is it a reason that they specifically have told me that I can't go out to seek them? Or is this reason, quote, quote, just something that I've made up in my mind because I am my own worst critic? So when I'm sad, I do tend to not want to seek out comfort or seek out any real help, but that's just how sadness feels sometimes. So the third card I chose for sadness is the Six of Emotions, or the Six of Cups from the Muse Tarot. And I find this card so interesting because I think sometimes the Six of Cups is portrayed as a more happy card. But when I saw this image, it definitely just made me think of what sadness feels like for me, especially because of this person's emotion or facial expression here. The thing is, I don't have much connection to my inner child. I don't have much memories of anything that happened before I was like really 12 or 13. So sometimes when I'm sad, I do think about my child, my inner child. But more importantly, I think about how I'm disconnected from this inner child. And I feel like that is portrayed so well here because this person is not looking at this child or this mirror here. They're looking like far off away. It feels like the child is right there, but they're not really connected. They're just looking away somewhere else. And this is just how sadness feels sometimes. I wish I could be connected to like my inner child and like have some idea of what that child was like. But all I can do is like really make someone up at this point because I just can't feel what that feels like. But that's okay, that's just how life is sometimes, and that's the cards I was dealt. So yeah, just this is what sadness feels like sometimes for me. And I appreciate this tag to remind us that emotions are not bad, they're not undesirable, they just are. Just like some of these cards in the tarot, they're not bad. They're not always undesirable, sometimes they just are. And the last emotion I have here is anger. So these three cards are what feels like anger to me. We've got the Three of Swords from the Tarot of Curious Creatures, the Five of Swords from the Revelations Tarot, and the Ten of Wands from the Mermaid Tarot. So one thing I want to say about my anger is that a lot of the time I feel like my anger is delayed. I kind of was made to feel like I should suppress my emotions growing up. I was in a lot of different extracurriculars and a lot of difficult classes. It just felt like there was not really much time for emotions. There wasn't time to process or think about if I was angry about anything because it felt like I didn't have a way to express or validate my anger. No one could really validate my anger. So because I wasn't really in touch with my emotions growing up through adolescence, I wasn't really in tune with myself. I feel like now I have this thing where my emotions, my strong emotions, tend to be really delayed. Sometimes when I feel angry, it takes me some time to realize actually I am angry, or like I was angry, or I should be angry actually because this thing is unfair and I actually don't like this thing. But oftentimes what I find with my anger is that part of my anger is always like at myself because it feels like, why didn't you realize this earlier? Why didn't you say something earlier? Why didn't you say something? Like if you did, maybe this could have been prevented and you wouldn't be in this angry, like miserable spot. So a lot of the anger does feel like self-inflicted and it is turned towards myself. And sometimes because my emotions are delayed or my intense anger is delayed, it just feels very like internal and it feels like I'm imploding in a way. And so this image just feels like I'm imploding, like I'm kind of stabbing myself in the process. But yeah, so because I just try to hold in my thoughts or my anger or my words, like it just turns it internal, and it's just not a fun time for me really. So another card that I want to mention is the Five of Swords from the Revelations Tarot. And if you're unfamiliar with this deck, it is also like oppositional. So the cards show kind of the reverse meaning. So it's a dual meaning here, a dual card here really. So this art here definitely feels like anger sometimes because sometimes when I'm angry, when I'm truly angry, I want to feel in control. I want to feel like I want to tell other people exactly how wrong they are and how right I am because I know better and they're stupid and they should know better. So here I am telling them that I know better. That's what anger feels like to me. It feels like this vindication, and it feels a little bit like compensating for all the past times when I didn't say something. So sometimes when I do feel angry, I tend to like project all of my past angers into that one like incident. So in this card, we see someone who is like stabbing. You know, a part of it is possibly stabbing at the ropes that are keeping someone bound, actually. But it could also be stabbing at someone else's like robe or someone else's belt. You know, it just feels like I want to stab at someone and I want them to feel like the pain that I feel occasionally or all the time, really. I want them to feel pain. And I feel like, you know, I don't know. That's all I can really say. That's just what anger feels like sometimes. And a third card that I pulled for the anger emotion is the Ten of Wands from the Mermaid Tarot. So this also feels like a really good example of what anger feels like to me because they have a face that feels like it's saying, I have to do everything myself around here to project or make up a little story about this card. It feels like everyone else has left their post and this person is just picking up all the wands and trying to go out on their own because everyone else like dropped the ball. And that's what anger feels like to me. Sometimes for no real rational reason, it feels like, oh, when I'm angry, it's like, oh my God, everyone's just dropping the ball and I have to do everything around here. I have to be the moral compass. I have to be the one keeping everyone in check. I have to be the one being the bigger person. I have to be the one doing this and doing that and, you know, holding all these burdens. I don't know. That's just what anger feels like to me. It feels very like self-righteous in a way. That's probably the rational reason. It's probably me trying to make myself feel self-righteous for like the anger or the righteousness or the pain that I'm feeling. So yeah, these three cards were a really interesting combination of what anger feels like to me. So yeah, that's anger, dude. That's when I'm angry. Now, in Katie Flowers' video, she did add a sixth emotion or sixth category for mixed emotions because there are some cards that she couldn't categorize into one emotion specifically. I wanted to choose a category that was more about what does it feel like when I'm emotionally regulated and stable and neutral and kind of in my flow state. So my flow state emotion or category here, I've got the Justice card from the Tarot of Mystical Moments, Justice from the Way of the Panda Tarot, and the Wheel of Fortune from the Somnia Tarot. So these three cards I feel like exemplify what I want to be like my flow state, my neutral state, my, I guess, meditative, maybe not meditative, just I feel in the flow. I feel like I'm able to move through emotions and through logic with ease, and I'm not really attached to anything. I feel serene. So I really like this Justice card to exemplify serenity because it feels like if when I'm in this state, I can observe things happening from a big picture sense and I won't feel attached to any particular thing. I'm able to just observe things happening and I'm not really passing judgment on any of them. I'm really just observing, and I'm observing from like a wise place. I'm observing from this like big picture, you know, high top down kind of place. So this is what I would like my emotional and logical flow state to feel like. This is another really cool example of flow state and the Justice card specifically as well, because I really like that with this Justice card here, this panda is keeping this other panda at bay. And I really appreciate this card because this is a forever reminder for me to keep my negative self-talk at bay, to keep my self-criticism at bay. All of the fears and anxieties and all the self-doubt, the nagging, mean voice in my head, I don't need to keep giving that voice reason. I might consider it sometimes, but I can't let it bring me down. I can't let it take over my life or take over my brain because I need to live my life. I need to allow myself to feel good. I need to remind myself to feel good. So I really, really like this card's art in particular for just the flow state, because hopefully when I'm in a flow state, in a regulated state, I can see clearly that these negative thoughts are just here to hurt me and they don't belong in my space, and I can keep them at foot's length. And the third card I wanted to show for flow state, regulated state, is this Wheel of Fortune from the Somnia Tarot. I really like this this setting fire to the Wheel of Fate idea, setting fire to the clock, setting fire to the idea of time, because a lot of my fears and my sadness and my feelings do come from the passage of time. The fear that, like, you know, have I wasted so much time doing this when I should have been doing that? What am I going to do in the future? Am I going to be okay in the future? I feel like when I'm in a regulated or flow state, this is just an amazing card or energy to show, to internalize, because you know what? Who cares what the future may hold? All I know is that I am feeling good right now, and I'm going to allow myself to feel good and feel regulated and feel even in the moment. I'm going to set fire to the idea that I have to be in a certain place by a certain time, because life is just a social construct. Life is just life. Like, you know, why would I want to spend time and energy making myself feel bad for what's already happened when I can choose to just feel good and, make the choices I feel like are best for me in this moment and just try to live life in the moment. So, this Wheel of Fortune card, this setting fire to this clock, just makes me feel like living in the moment. I really, really love that energy. So, that's like my sixth category, my like flow state emotions, flow state regulated type of, I don't know, energy. Okay, so those are the cards that I would cast as the emotions inside my head. Did any of them resonate with you too? I'm curious to hear. And like I mentioned in the intro, I thought that this tag was so interesting because it required more mindfulness than just picking decks for different categories. Having to look through 78 cards times all the decks that I chose to look through was a really cool exercise. So I really got to look at more of the art than just like, oh yeah, that's a 5 of swords next, that's a 6 of swords next, that's a 7 of swords next. I really had to look at the art and what emotions and feelings it brought up inside me. And I just thought that was so cool. So it was really cool to pay attention more to the faces and the bodies, and again, the art on the card, instead of just pulling the same like 3 of swords card from each deck. And looking through the art and just really admiring and thinking about these cards really inspired me to want to deep dive even more with some of these decks because I noticed different details in certain cards that I might not have noticed before if I wasn't deep diving into them and try to be more mindful of them like I was here. So this tag really inspired me to want to look at more tags and even try to create more tags and sets of prompts where I'm casting cards as certain roles instead of just different decks as certain roles. So I'm pretty excited to find more tags where I get to talk more about the cards and different art and different topics. And just talk more about things. Because again, I don't know what else I can say about my decks. I just don't feel like I have too many insights there. Maybe I'll try to develop some other Pixar related tags. I don't really know, but we'll see, The possibilities are endless. So that's all for today. Those are my cards cast as emotions inside my head. I would love to hear what kinds of cards or roles or court cards or whatever resonate with you and how would you cast them as the emotions inside your head. So that's all for today. See you next time. Bye!